cut dovetails by hand. One is they're aesthetically good to look at. Another reason that hand-cut dovetails makes a strong and efficient joint. Another reason that I think that hand-cutting dovetails is important is to develop your accuracy skills in woodworking. Many times we think accuracy only belongs to machine metalworking, but it belongs to woodworking as well, and we need to do things that develop our woodworking accuracy. There are two parts to hand-cut dovetails. There are the tails and there are the pins. Generally there is a debate as to, well, which do I cut first, the tails or the pins? You can do either. I have found that if I cut the tails first, it makes it easier, as we will see later, to lay out the pins. Another thing that you need to remember in hand-cutting dovetails is the drawer side needs to be out of a softer wood than the drawer front. The reason for this is when you compress the tails into the pins, that they will compress a little bit and make a tight joint. Normally, the softer wood is generally accepted to be cut at about 8-degree angle, this angle right here. On harder woods, it is recommended about a 6-degree angle. I personally prefer even a greater angle for hardwoods. I like to get to use about a 10, 12, maybe even a 14-degree angle. It just looks better. Let's take a look at the few tools needed to hand-cut dovetails. One is a mallet. Also, a T-bevel is quite useful. A marking gauge. You will need knives. It may be an X-Acto knife or a chip carving knife, or a knife to scribe your edges with, which we will discuss later. A pencil. You will need chisels. Normally a 1/2-inch chisel, a 1/4-inch chisel, and a small 1/4-inch chisel with the sides ground to a slight bevel, the reason for which we will explain a little bit later. And a saw. They make specialty saws such as a dovetail saw, which saws a really nice straight curve. For this demonstration, we will be using a Japanese saw. So you see there's very few tools required to actually perform the operation of cutting hand-cut dovetails. There are two types of dovetails. One being the half-blind dovetail, as I have here, which is commonly used for drawer construction. The other is the through-type dovetail, commonly used for carcass construction. To begin the laying out of the dovetails, we use the marking gauge first. This marking gauge has a knife point that slices the scribe line as opposed to scraping the scribe line, and this is what I recommend. We mentioned earlier that the drawer side is a little thinner than the front. The drawer front in this case is 7/8. The drawer side is 11/16. It makes it convenient because that only requires you to make one setting on your marking gauge, as you will see here in just a moment. So the first thing is to set the scribe point exactly the same width as your drawer side. And we need to be very precise with it. Okay, once that is accomplished, now we're ready to scribe both sides of the drawer side. I I'll make a scribe line on the edge also, the reasons for which we will see a little bit later. But once we have the drawer side scribed, now we need to scribe the drawer front, the back of the drawer front. And you see the knife edge on the point makes a nice clean cut. That's opposed to a point that scrapes, which pulls the fiber. But this makes a nice place to put your chisel in later when you work to that line. And we also need to make a scribe line with a marking gauge across the front of the drawer. Working from the back side, so now then we have all of our scribe lines that we need to make with a marking gauge. Now the next step is to lay out the tails. And a point we might want to make at this time is, why do we call these the tails? Some people think that may look like a dovetail. And as I said earlier, these are referred to as pins. I prefer to lay out and cut the tails first because I can lay out the pins more accurately from tails rather than vice versa. Someone else may prefer the other method, which either method is acceptable. So to finish the layout of our tails, to establish this angle, we could use the bevel gauge, or we can use a manufactured template that can be purchased from two companies. The next point that I would like to make is, rather than using a pencil to scribe our lines, I want to use a knife. This happens to be a chip carving knife, which works excellent for me. The layout, to some extent, is done by eye. The first mark that you make it lightly, because if you try to make too heavy a mark first, the grain may pull the mark off. This needs to be a very clean and well-defined line, and that's one reason we use a knife. Just very lightly. Then as we go, make it a little heavier. Now we're going to make one pin in the middle for the sake of this demonstration. So we simply locate the middle of our drawer. This drawer is 5 inches wide. Now from that mark, we can lay out the middle pin. At this time, we want to select what size we want to make our pin. Do we want it real narrow at the bottom or a little wider? So that's a personal choice. We're going to make one that's not so narrow. Okay, after I lay out the tails with the knife, I want to scribe a line across the end of the drawer front to use as a guide. So since I'm not going to be using this as a line to work up to, I'm going to use a pencil. And on the template, the back side of the template, the front side has the angle of your dovetail. On the back side, it uses square. If you don't have this, you can use any square that you have, such as this small combination square. And I I'm making these lines here with a pencil just to give me a guide for sawing. Now, as I stated before, you can purchase dovetail saws. We saw a really fine, curved, soft, straight. Well, you can accomplish the same thing with a Japanese saw, which works on the pull stroke. Adequate, you have a little bit of a hard time keeping it straight because of the very narrow kerf that's in the setting of the teeth. Do this as accurately as possible, but bear in mind that you're not working to any pins yet. You're making the first piece, so you have the next. When we make our pins, we will have to be very accurate in what we do. Saw down to the line. The next thing that I do is I take a pencil and I'm going to mark the wood that's going to be removed. This just keeps me from making mistakes and removing the wrong part of the tails. The next step we want to do is saw this out. It could be chiseled out. You could take a chisel and chisel this out, but I think that with the modern day tools that we have today, that you're probably like I am. I take advantage of all the tools that I can. So let's go to the scroll saw and saw these out. As we begin sawing, an important point to make here is we're not going to saw right on the line. We're going to saw off the line, and later we're going to chisel up to the line, use a chisel. That's what I call creeping up to the line, and this just allows for accuracy. We're going to finish cutting the tails with a chisel. Now, a point that I want to make with the chisel is, since the chisel has a wedged edge, that as you enter the wood, it has a tendency to wedge itself against the back side of the blade. Therefore, we need to take very shallow paring cuts so we can be accurate to the scribe line that we have laid out. This is the time that you really want to be accurate. I use a mallet, but I don't tap the chisel very hard. You don't need to. If you do, you're going to break off the little burrs that's on the edge of the chisel. You also want to lean your chisel towards the front of the drawer side to make a slight, ever so slight cut towards the back. Just go down just a little ways. Now then, we can lay the chisel in the scribe line very accurately. Tilt the chisel forward a little bit. And just give it a tap or two. Use the back of the chisel to line itself with the groove. On the edge, just make a slight cut with the chisel. We'll finish those from a different cut later. Also, I want to make a point that you need a way to clamp this down solid on the work surface. And the ideal way is on your workbench, use a device as of this. I find this very convenient to use for this purpose. Now we did one side, now we're going to do the other side, but this time we're going to go and meet the other mark that we just made. So let's take remove part of the wood. Now let's take a final cut. Let's work both all the way across the cut. Let's now just work it down until we meet the cut that we started on the back side. That has allowed us to come up very accurately to the line that we scribed with the marking gauge. Now let's finish cutting the tails, and let's cut these outer edges. So here again, we want to use the scribe line that we made. This time we chisel very vertical, and just very, very lightly. You could almost do this without the mallet, but if you use the mallet very lightly, it's generally with acceptable results. We have just completed the first step in making dovetails by first cutting the tails on the drawer side. Now we will then proceed to lay out the pins on the drawer front. Pins. The drawer will go together in this fashion, this being the inside of the drawer front. So we have the line scribed, which is equal to the thickness of our drawer side. We want to place this in our vise with the inside of the drawer facing away from you. Clamp it in your vise with it standing proud slightly. Now then, place the drawer side very accurately over the end of the drawer front. Just clamp it down where it will stay in place. And now then, once again, we're going to use the knife to scribe the outline for the pins. Once you have finished scribing the outline of the tails onto the front of the front edge of the drawer, then we can remove it from the vise and continue the marking. I'm going to finish the layout of the pins by scribing a line of 90 degrees on the back edge down to my scribe line, which equals to the thickness of the drawer side. This just lays out the profile of the pin down to the line that I have scribed across the drawer front that is equal to the thickness of the drawer side. This gives me a nice clean line of which to work to with a chisel later. Once again, it's good to take a pencil and mark the wood that you're going to need to remove.
Stop.
Now the next step is to finish the, we'll begin actually cutting the pins. And we do that by with the saw. Now at the point that I want to make at this time, we're not going to saw right on the line. We're going to stay off the line approximately 30 seconds or less. Very carefully saw down to our scribe lines and stop. Now we're going to use the drill press to remove a majority of the waste. Finish cutting the pins with chisel, and again clamp the drawer front down on your bench in a substantial manner where it's comfortable to you. And again, we're going to work up to the line. We're not going to go to the line first. We'll stay about a 30-second off the line. Now I'm going to lay the chisel in this line that I scribed. I'm going to tilt the chisel forward ever so slightly, just a degree or so. And use that cut to line the next cut up with the back of my chisel. this, you can make very precise cuts with the chisel. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I took a 1/4-inch chisel and ground the sides back at the bevel of the sides back so I could allow me to get right in the corner without disturbing the, so I could leave a clean edge. Another point I need to make is select, for your drawer front, select straight grain wood. Otherwise, any kind of grain that's slightly, what I call slightly swirly, makes it difficult to get a good straight cut with your chisel. I'm still staying away from the line about a 32nd. The last cut to be a very thin paring cut. Lay the chisel in the scribe line, lean it forward, Now we'll work from this direction. I'm still staying off of the scribe line because I want to just work up to the line as I go. Be sure that it sets down on the face of your table very flat and straight. Using the scribe line that we made earlier to guide my chisel. And we'll finish working to our line. We need to be very exact at this point if we're going to have nice tight fitting dovetails. Now's the time to examine what you have just done to be sure that you've got all the wood removed, that your corners are nice and clean. Be sure that all of your surfaces are straight and parallel. Now's the time for the test to see how accurate your work is. Now, when you insert this, you want it to be able to press it in rather than hammer it in. So, job complete.